Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Thanks for coming on to one of these digital discussions. Good to see everybody. Hope you're well and healthy. So let's see. Just quick update. So we're not going to have a discussion series next week because this guy needs a bit of a break. So we're just gonna. Next week is my non-data discussion week. So I have already set up for the week after, but next week I'm just taking a breather. So yeah, so just tweet at me, but you won't be able to see my face for 1 week. I'm sure you'll survive. And that's pretty much it. I think that's the only discussion. The only other announcement I have is just for those of you who have been coming onto these or haven't. All of these have been recorded. They're all available on the Urban Institute YouTube page. So feel free to go there if you want to see any of these that we've been doing over the last 6 weeks or so. Okay, so that's all. So today I'm excited to have Tom Mock chatting with us about our studio and Tidy Tuesday and anything else that you want to know. I'm guessing he would even answer some specific coding questions if we get that detailed and are that nerdy. And I trust that this group would be very excited about that. So the way we do these is Tom and I will chat fairly briefly. And if you have questions for Tom, just throw them in the chat window and I'll just build a little queue. Right now there's about 20 of us. And if we stay at that level roughly, we won't even need a queue. You can just unmute yourselves and ask questions. So Tom, thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought maybe you could just tell folks a little bit about yourself. And then I thought we would start by talking about, I don't know, maybe talk about what you do at our studio, and then we can talk about Tidy Tuesday a little bit.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so I'll give you the elevator pitch of my life story, which is kind of a wide and circuitous journey to our studio. So started my undergrad here in Texas at Southwestern doing exercise physiology, really found a love for data and data visualization through kind of movement analysis, doing most of that in Excel and SPSS for analysis. Went from there to grad school in Florida for exercise physiology, but this time looking more around like aging and how exercise can be helpful for the aging process. And then lastly, ended up at a PhD back in Texas at the University of North Texas Health Science Center, doing a neurobiology of aging. At this point, I've been in academia for about 7 years straight and was pretty quickly realizing that I didn't necessarily want to go in and run my own lab or kind of stay in the research mindset. So about 2 years into my PhD, I was like, what skill set do I have that I can pivot to? So really liked working with data, really liked working with data visualization, modeling, statistics, and was interested in data science. So tried to get involved with the R community around doing data science work and learning R as opposed to using Systat or SPSS for my statistics. Kind of taught myself R along with the R4DS online learning community. And then use kind of that knowledge to end up with a job at RStudio, who's a large contributor to both the open source world of R and enterprise software for doing data science kind of at the enterprise level in addition to at the academic level. So I've been here at RStudio for 2 years. My role is on customer success, which essentially is helping our existing customers use both professional products that we provide, open source software and other technologies to take R and put it into a production environment, whether that's Shiny, which is interactive web apps, or just automation of R Markdown reports or graphics or modeling, and the idea of using statistical modeling to provide business value. I specifically work with technology companies, so a lot of the time R is a big chunk of that, but they're also using technologies like Python or Julia, or SQL, Spark, all sorts of other technologies that kind of work in conjunction with R.
Nice. I love these stories because no one comes to data viz or any of these tools from like one path. It's always, yeah, I was on the moon and then I decided I didn't want to be an astronaut anymore. So I decided to learn Python, right? So I find it interesting that you taught yourself R, although I would guess that most people on this call have done or are doing the same thing. So then how did that move over, or not move over, but how did you evolve into starting and then hosting and moderating Tidy Tuesday?
Yeah. So when I first was exposed to R, it was as a second year grad student. We had a statistics course. This was probably like my third or fourth general intro to statistics course through undergrad, master's, and PhD. So I had a pretty good background in at least enough statistics to be dangerous in biology, not enough to be a traditional statistician or data scientist per se. The thing about this course was that it was taught purely in R, and I had never been exposed to that. I was like, oh, this could be interesting. And unfortunately, the way it was taught was pretty poor. So I had an awful experience through the course. I really didn't enjoy kind of learning it, and got really frustrated. Ironically, like 3 years, 5 years later, I love R, and it's like I would stand for using R for everything. Like that's definitely the biggest tool in my toolkit at this point, and something I love. I think the part about learning R and kind of self-taught R is that the tidyverse for me was extremely helpful in making that journey easier and kind of getting me to be powerful quickly. So I was able to get these wins and then kind of build up my programming skills on top of that. Previously, that R course just kind of dove just to statistics and ignored all of the like how to do this beyond just getting your like ANOVA output or your linear model output. So there was all these rough edges we kept running into that were never really explained in the course, which was unfortunate. In terms of learning and self-taught, after that course ended and I was realizing, hey, I need to continue using R if I want to get a job eventually. I was like, how can I teach myself this? I found the R for Data Science textbook, which is freely available online. So Hadley wrote that. Really, it came out right at that moment when I needed it, which is a great book. You can purchase it. I think it's like $20 on Amazon, and it's also freely available online. I'll share a link to that later. But that really just leveled me up like 10 floors in terms of what I was able to do quickly. Before I was just getting stuck reading in Excel files. Like I was literally just trying to do my day-to-day work for my mentor, and like analyze animal behavior and how my animals were aging. And it was just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So by using that book and kind of working through example data sets, I was like, hey, this is actually leveling up my skill set. Kind of pivoting that towards Tidy Tuesday, really the process I found there was like, hey, I need to prove to somebody that I can do this analysis. I can't show up to a data science interview and say, well, here's what I found about neurobiology of aging in 16-month-old mice. Like that's not going to fly. So I was like, well, where can I find marketing data? Where can I find, other data that's interesting in a business setting? And I spent weeks and months finding data, cleaning it up, and getting it ready just to do some like toy analysis on. And it was frustrating because I couldn't find that readily available. So I was having to combine all these sources. So I went into this kind of workflow of cleaning up a data source, getting it ready, and then making kind of a portfolio item out of it. And eventually realized like, hey, this could be useful for somebody else down the road, whether it was me or the other people. At the same time, I was pretty heavily involved with the R for DS online learning community, which was essentially a book club built around R for DS. And as a learner mentor there, I was trying to help them figure out a project long-term to combine mentors with learners so that people who were experienced could help people who were new get up to speed quickly and create some type of portfolio item. I was like, well, I got the thing for that. Like, let's try this. Let's do, there's other weekly projects out there, but, let's do one in R. Let's give them a data set, show you how to do the kind of workflow of import data, tidy it up, transform it, visualize it, and end up a communication, like this core workflow of R for data science. And that was April 2017. We're April 2020 now, and, kind of 3 years into the project, and it's been a huge blessing just to see how many people it's been helpful to. I've seen a couple people get jobs out of it, and at the very least, tons of people learn a lot over the past few years.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you I'm curious about a lot of things you just said. So before I say, just keep talking, I'll just say if anyone has questions, just put them in the chat box, and we can start that way. I don't know, for people who aren't familiar with it, can you talk a little bit about, I guess a little bit about how it works each week, but also like how many people are involved and where do they publish to, and I guess some, just sort of that round ballparky sort of feeling for the group. Whoop, hold on. I think you might be muted. Let me unmute you here.
Oh, that's my fault.
Yep.
Yeah, I muted myself.
There you go.
Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so there's kind of this core workflow for doing this. And again, the most basic idea is that every week you can visit this URL that I'm at, which is GitHub, where the data is stored. And there will be a new data set, an article around what this data set came from, or like kind of contextual information. And we kind of, as the community, ask people to visualize it, clean it up, kind of make some type of story out of it. There's a core workflow here of taking that data, cleaning it, modeling it, visualizing it, kind of whatever you want to do, and then eventually, hopefully sharing it on Twitter with the hashtag TidyTuesday. That allows you to, even if you literally have 0 followers on Twitter, it instantly gets you into a community where you can get either feedback on your code, feedback on your visualization, or if you're completely, swamped and don't know where to start, you can copy someone else's code and work from that. I think that's the beauty of, using code is, as long as you copy paste like the exact same thing, you can create the same thing in your environment. So I was really passionate about that idea of connecting people wherever they were on that spectrum. So if you just search for Tidy Tuesday on Google, this should be the first pop-up for you. It'll take you to the R for Data Science GitHub. So it'd be github.com/R4DataScience. Tidy Tuesdays here, and it'll walk you through. There's a lot of information here about like what we're doing, some basic rules about like being kind to one another. We're not trying to make fun of graphics or to say like this is a bad graphic, make it better. It's more of just like work with data, work with code, learn from each other. And I know every week I learn a lot from other people's submissions. Once we get down to the actual data, you can see there's data from 2018, 2019, and 2020. Each of these will take you to either a data set, the original source of that data set, so you could get the raw data if you wanted to, and then a related article. So a lot of the time, this is like 538, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, The Pudding, all groups where they've happened to share the data and the code that they've used to prepare it, along with the visualization of the article they've created. Yeah, so I'll pause there and see if you have any other questions, or I can keep going.
I'm not sure I have any questions, but I'll see if anybody else has any questions. There's about 20 of us, so if anybody has any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me or Tom. But Tom, why don't you can go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, so this, if we go into one specifically, like a few weeks ago, we did the Tour de France. So if you go into a specific data set, it again has a little bit of context about what the Tour de France is, where the data set came from, any hat tips to where the data was shared, and importantly, like code to directly read it into R. So when you read in the data set, like you could skip kind of that process of having to download the data, load it in, you could read it directly off of GitHub and start doing analysis on it. We include a data dictionary, so you're not kind of guessing as to what the columns mean or what the rows are. And importantly, a lot of the time I include how the data was cleaned. I thought this is arguably the more difficult part that I do each week, is finding a data set, cleaning it up, and then putting it here. That process has taught me a lot about like how R works and how different data sets are dirty in their own way, and trying to prepare it, because often you see examples that come with just like the cleanest, world's most perfect CSV or Excel file. And if you go to a government site, you're never going to find one of those, or if you are, it's very rare. So this usually helps like me learn a lot, and then other people, if you want to know how like we cleaned up the data, this is where it's coming from. The other thing that I really love about Tidy Tuesday is the community that's built around it. So Neil Grantham, who's another contributor, actually created a Shiny application, which is a web application written in R. So this one is tidytuesday.rocks. So if you put that in as the URL, it'll take you to this website. And what it is it's aggregated all the past tweets that people put out with Tidy Tuesday on Twitter. And you can sort or filter through these to get the different visualizations that people have created. So this is a really cool way of kind of going through different data sets and finding graphics that are really cool or that you're interested in and trying to recreate them or see how someone created that. And here's one actually from Neil himself where he created a data viz as well. And he actually includes you can download the raw CSV for this, so you could actually get to the data or find the article or the source file as well. So it's pretty cool to see how other people have kind of extended Tidy Tuesday into their own kind of contribution.
Yeah. I learned a new word during one of these discussions, faff, which is apparently British slang for something that's becomes overly complicated. So like I was saying, this was with Cassia St. Clair, like you do these chats, you think it's just going to be, just put open a Zoom and we'll all just chat. No, you got to like set up the page and the Zoom thing. And then there's all the advertising. And then you got to make an image so people will see it. So I can see there's a lot of faff going on in this project. Like every week you're like, there's a million things on that GitHub page that you have to prepare.
Right. Yeah, so this has also been a journey, like I said, self-taught programmer. So a lot of the stuff learning on the fly. I remember when I first got started in GitHub, I was just having trouble like getting the data uploaded. So luckily, working with other people and asking for their help, like creating a small R package around, creating some of this stuff. So there's an R package with functions that writes the data dictionary for me. So I just give it a data set, it writes the data dictionary. There's one for posting it to Twitter. So all I have to do is say, here's what the data set's name is, here's the URL. And it will actually take that from R, send out all the pictures and the summary out to Twitter each week on Monday. Creating the READMEs, like there's a skeleton there, so I can go into R and actually create the READMEs pretty programmatically, which was taking a lot of time. I looked at, trying to think of the commits a while back, because it's all CSVs, there's like 2 million or 3 million rows. It said that it like is changing in terms of code files, but that's mainly because it's just CSVs I keep uploading. Right. So it looks like a ton of code, but it's really mainly just data. But if you want to learn how to do something, like I'm very much a believer in project-based learning in conjunction with trying to work through a textbook. So like the R4DS book is fantastic. It takes you through this process of importing data, cleaning it up, communicating with it. But often, the example is not going to speak to you in terms of maybe I'm not interested in flight data or MT cars about like the built-in data sets in R or Iris or whatever educational data set out there. So a secondary goal of Tidy Tuesday is that now you can take any data set, whether you're interested in sports or beer or education initiatives or hotel bookings, like you'll be able to find something that is interesting to you and you can now apply your skill set to something of interest for yourself.
Do you find that people in the community are talking to one another while they're creating their visualizations, or is it mostly people go to the site, they grab the thing, they go make their visualization, and then they're done and they post it and they say, this is what I made, and then the conversation starts?
Yeah, I think it's the second one. A lot of the time, people will post it onto Twitter and then the dialogue starts at that point. So that's been really cool to see, like people be like, hey, I got stuck at this point. Anyone have any pointers? And people can kind of build on their own data set or their own visualization, and their second iteration is improved. On the other end, there are local kind of user groups or meetups, whether it's digitally now or in the past, actually in person, where people would meet up as a group in their academic group or in their city and just like work on a Tidy Tuesday data set together. So at that point, there would be tons of like actual dialogue during the building process, which I thought was amazing. We don't really have a great venue for that today, but it'd be something interesting to.
Yeah. I always wonder about these because I feel like the other big project that's like this, Makeover Monday, is a similar kind of thing where there's a thread of conversation at the end of the project when people post it. And I'm just curious, I guess why. I mean, I think I know why people don't post things in process, right? Like no one wants to be criticized and embarrassed. But it is an interesting thing that is, you know, not necessarily inherent to these projects of getting that real-time feedback of I got stuck here, you know, and I'm sure a bunch of people, you know, speaking from experience, right? It's like how you and I first met. Like I was learning R and I got stuck on something and asked the community and it was great. But I could see why people might not in their workflow get stuck and say, hey, I made this thing, but I don't know how to get to the next step and, you know, maybe not get that feedback right away.
Yeah, so there is kind of, we do see that a bit more inside the R4DS online learning community. So there is actually a Tidy Tuesday channel within that Slack group. So taking a step back, like upstream of Tidy Tuesday is the R4DS online learning community. Literally used to be a book club 3 years ago. Now it's like this massive learning environment run by John Harmon and a lot of other folks around connecting mentors to people learning R. So it's a great area. Jesse Mostapak, who actually founded the R4DS, like has some information that she did back in 2017 in the different iterations. You can get there if you just search for like R4 data science online learning community. It'll take you to the home page where you could actually log into the Slack group. And there's kind of a blessing and a curse with Slack in terms of now you are slightly protected from the public world. So you're not putting something on Twitter where anyone in the world can come and like either criticize you or give you something positive. Mostly it's positive, but there's definitely people out there who are going to be a little bit more aggressive. Within this community, it's very much guide rails to like, hey, we don't do that here. Like you shouldn't be, you know, mean to one another when you're working on these things. And there is more dialogue around how do I even get started with this, as opposed to here's my finished product, have a good time.
So there are a couple questions in the chat box, and I want to start with Sarah's, because Sarah, I was going to ask a very similar question.
Yeah.
So Sarah, you should feel free to unmute yourself, but I'll kick this one off because this particular topic, we've sort of on many of these discussions so far, we've been talking about COVID related visualizations and how some people are not, they're maybe data scientists, but they're not epidemiologists. And so there's a, you know, maybe misinformation or misrepresented information. And we've talked a little bit with other folks about Tidy Tuesday and Makeover Monday. And so Sarah's question is really specific to our subject matter experts weighing in. And so I guess I'd put all that to you and say, how do you think about people working on these visualizations when they're not necessarily experts in some of the topics that you're giving them to work on? Yeah, and Sarah, absolutely. You should feel free to chime in if you have more.
Yeah, I can just imagine, that it's like, it's a hard thing to weigh. I mean, I totally see the motivation of like, it's much more fun to work with real data that you're actually interested in the topic of than these kind of toy data sets that we see. But then it's so easy to go wrong and not quite understand what you're looking at. And so how do you kind of bake that in when thinking about how to work with this data?
Yeah, absolutely. And we try pretty hard to, you know, stay within kind of some guide rails for how creative the data sets are. Like we made a very conscious decision to say, like, if you want to work with COVID data, that's totally fine. Like, you know, more power to you, but that's not something we're going to promote and kind of open up to the floodgates for us promoting it. We do kind of bake in some stuff both at the overarching level. So here it's just like, there's going to be data. The goal of this is really just to provide a forum for practice in terms of data wrangling, data visualization. We're not trying to publish a paper or even publish a article. That being said, we also try, like, each of these data sets, like trying to connect something that's, at least well researched. So like if there's something about like measles vaccination, like we're coming from a news article that has additional context or additional research they've done, so people aren't going into it fully blind. We're trying to give as much context as we can with each of the data sets. I guess the last part is, absolutely, people are going to make the wrong inferences or wrong conclusions. And I think that within the context of this, like, we are tagging it, or people are tagging it with, like, we're doing this for Tidy Tuesday. People are like, hey, I think you may have made a mistake with using this type of scaling. Like this actually is this type of relationship. And people actually have a good dialogue around why something may not be as appropriate. Less so about like, hey, you're wrong, I cannot believe you've done this, and more of like a learning opportunity there. But it's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah, it's also, I think, interesting, and anyone feel free to chime in on this discussion, because I think it's a really important one. It's also a lot of these topics that I'm looking at, right? It's on NFL attendance and hotel bookings and, goals and something about the office. Like, if you misrepresent how you're supposed to wash your hands or whether you should wear a face mask when you go outside, I mean, those are life-threatening decisions that you are encouraging or discouraging. I don't know how important it is to people's health to know more about the Office television show, right?
Yeah, I'm imagining the subject matter expert on The Office weighing in.
Right, is my 13-year-old daughter, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do wonder. I mean, the thing that's curious to me is when if I make a Tidy Tuesday graph and I put it up,
Mm-hmm.
and even if I add the hashtag Tidy Tuesday to it,
Right.
It's not even necessarily true that people who are going to misunderstand
Mm-hmm.
the information I'm presenting know what Tidy Tuesday is, right? And I think like an even easy representation of that is like John Byrne Murdoch's line graphs that he's been making for the Financial Times. Like at the beginning, people were clearly stealing those and cutting off the Financial Times footer on that. Like it's so terrible. But so, I mean, yeah. So I don't know if there's much else to say about this. I think it's an interesting, thing to bat around, and what is the right way to make sure that these things aren't, don't spread and misrepresent the truth. But again, it's, the Office and NHL goals. So.
Right. Yeah. Again, I don't think there is like a perfect answer there. Like it's a spectrum, and I'm sure that regardless of how clear the data set or kind of innocuous the data set is, that someone could be either potentially like, hey, this is just completely wrong, and you even grab the wrong data, or like your representation is incorrect, or it could just be misused down the road. So, I think we just try and be careful and try and build a community around it. So if something does happen, at least within the community, we've done a good job of like helping each other understand, as opposed to just like letting it go wild. But we try and kind of push the envelope sometimes in terms of like some data sets that are nuanced, and we try and put that into the descriptor. So there was some really interesting data from like ProPublica and other groups where, they spend so much time like writing up these articles and aggregating data and doing all this good work. We want to bring attention to the work they're doing, but there's still a lot of nuance to the story. And we try and capture that at least at the README level. So when people are working with it, they understand that you can't just say this type of thing is occurring because, like, there's a lot of nuance to be had there.
Yeah. Have you ever prepped or found a data set that you were like, oh, this is a good one, and then thought maybe we shouldn't put this up?
Absolutely. I mean, multiple reasons. I've had a Chipotle orders data set that I've probably been sitting on for like over a year. This is not because it's inappropriate. It's just, it's in a funky format, and it was originally like nested data with JSON. Mm-hmm. So it's fairly straightforward to like make that into a tidy data format where like each with rows and columns, and it's now flat. But it's kind of slightly messy to get there, and then people, trying to represent it. So I've been sitting on that one for a while and never used it. I cannot tell you how many times I've spent like an hour or two on a data set, cleaned it up, and realized this is not interesting, or like, it's just, there is no way of like getting this to a point where people are going to want to work with this. And
Yeah.
that's kind of gut wrenching after spending time on it, but I at least try and learn something from it for the next time.
Right.
Luckily, I've been asking people to like submit their own data sets. So these issues up here, almost all of them are data sets that other people have submitted. So there's like 100 data sets here in the pipeline. That's been amazing, because otherwise, like, we're just kind of, roaming around finding data sets that might be interesting. So this has been like, Animal Crossing is one I've been spending some time on for the past 2 weeks, trying to prep that. And there's all sorts of other data sets here. Trying to think. I think most of the time, if we know a data set is going to be problematic, it's kind of nixed ahead of time, as opposed to after we're cleaning it. There are a few in this list that are very nuanced, and we've just been kind of trying to either have a subject matter expert write up something. So like, I've been working, one of these is around like homelessness data in Ohio. And the person who submitted it actually works on homelessness data in Ohio. Like, it's actually the work that she does. So, but like, trying to coordinate around having them do a write-up and try and provide the nuance there, as opposed to me, who knows nothing about it, just sharing an article.
Yeah. I bet the cocktails one is tough too, right? Like,
yeah, is
it bourbon? Is it whiskey? Is it rye? Like, what is the right?
Yeah, so this is a good one. I got to pace out the different uses of alcohol for sure, because we just did a beer one a while back. So we'll wait a couple of weeks.
Well, I don't know. If you're anything like me in these days, there's a lot more alcohol being consumed. So maybe it's okay.
Absolutely.
So Allison has a question about learning GitHub. I don't know, Allison, if you want to unmute, you can, or, well, not everybody's able to unmute. So, so Allison wants to know about learning GitHub. Did you learn and use it in grad school, or did you pick that up when you were working on Tidy Tuesday?
Yeah. So in terms of grad school, I was the only R user in my department. So I didn't use it directly for like collaboration internally. But I saw how other people were using GitHub as like a repository, essentially like a public Dropbox or something. So I am not at all using GitHub in the classical way of like being a code repository for like packages, like R packages. I'm literally just pushing mainly data and then flat code files out there. So you can see I've got this giant red line here that says like most of this is HTML, and most of it is actually failing in terms of like any testing I'm doing, because there's no testing.
Hold on, you stop sharing your screen. So if you want it, if you're
I'm so sorry. Yeah, let me reshare. There we go. We're good. Yeah. So if you look at this page, like, this is all red because it's 99.7% HTML. Because it's mainly just the descriptors around the data sets more than it is traditional code. So yes, I definitely learned a lot about GitHub doing this project in terms of like writing Markdown and formatting things nicely, and how to do like pushing and pulling and doing pull requests and having people collaborate. I still have a lot to learn about GitHub, but this was a great way to learn. And I think there's some nice guides down here for like, getting started with GitHub, or learning the basics of Git or GitHub and how to use it directly from R. A lot of people will start their own repository, whether they're forking the data and actually copying it, or just starting like their own personal repo that's similar, where they like read in the data and then upload or push their own code to that. So I mainly learned through Tidy Tuesday.
And Luca has a question. Luca, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
I really appreciated the book Art for Data Science. I really like it, and I'm experiencing really good improvement in this last month, because I started like 1 month ago in a way like more consistent. So I was wondering if you have another recommendation to speed up the learning process, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to like clarify that almost all there's so much free material out there that try and at least like read some of the source documents before like purchasing additional books. I'm on bookdown.org, which is a copy of probably 30 or 40 different books, or I lied, it's 18. I thought there was more, but there might be more later. So this is a bunch of different applications of R and data science and kind of different flavors there. I would say like it matters what you want to do. If you're looking at like data visualization, these are two great books. Data Viz by Kieran Healy is very much a how to do data visualization in R, specifically with ggplot, versus like Fundamentals of Data Visualization is more of a method agnostic overview of what data visualization is and why you make certain decisions. Additionally, there's like how to write an R package or using command line with R, text mining or R Markdown, geocomputation, like all sorts of other resources here. The two, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. No, I really appreciate the way, for example, because something that I discovered by chance, the screencasts of David Robinson. I used to watch them, and I really appreciate the way that he approaches the data, because my mean is not actually visualizing in a super fancy way, but rather analyzing it in a original way. So extracting new information from the data set is something that really inspires me a lot. So that was more or less the goal of my learning recently.
Yeah, absolutely. In that fashion, then there's two people, and what Luca was talking about is the Tidy Tuesday data sets are just a repository of data. And there's all sorts of other people who are creating material or learning resources around them. So Dave Robinson, who's at drob on Twitter, does usually like a weekly screencast using that data to do machine learning or predictive analytics with R specifically. Those are fantastic because he shares all the code. He talks and kind of explains why he's making decisions as he's writing code, and they're about an hour long. So it's really good to be like, I've got a data set I can work with. I can see someone who's truly an expert work through that same data set, and I can copy their code and see what they were doing. The other one is Julia Silg. She actually works at our studio on the Tidy Models team. So tidymodels.org is a website around doing statistical modeling in R. And I believe there's a link to a learning section here, which is really good. Let me see, I'm trying to remember. Hesitant to just click around, but this is a really good resource, is tidymodels.org. And specifically, if you search for like Julia Silg, Tidy Tuesday, she has a bunch of similar videos where she goes through and does statistical analysis on R, on these Tidy Tuesday data sets using R. And she has her own YouTube channel at the same name. So there'd be Julia Silg and then Dave Robinson, Tidy Tuesday. If you do that, you'll find, I think he has like 40 or 50 videos at this point going through Tidy Tuesday data sets.
I think this is really fascinating because you can actually see. So it's a little bit an answer to the question you had before. So what's the way to counter, let's say, the effect of looking at the data that you don't really know? So I think maybe this is my perception. I didn't study their curricula, but these people look at the data and analyze the data in a really professional way, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
replicating the situations and the codes sometimes can uncover some learning from the data, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've learned a lot in terms of like how Dave approaches data sets, and in terms of like the common tidyverse functions he's using to do data summaries or exploratory data analysis. And then obviously going into the modeling phase, like when to use certain models, or like how he's using the models and writing the code to do that type of machine learning or this type of inference or predictive analytics. So those are great resources, absolutely. And there's a lot of good material out there around that.
given that I think you have a biological background, from what I
Mhm.
understood, do you recommend any source or any specific person or that is doing screencasts or a source for learning statistics for biology with R?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think it's slightly dependent. There's a lot of books out there that are general. Danielle Navarro has a really good one around just learning statistics. It's mainly into psychology, but all the classical linear models and ANOVAs and the like that you'd see in kind of an undergrad statistics course. Specific to biology, I don't know of any screencasts. But yeah, I'm not quite sure on the biology front. Most of the stuff that I learned was when I was in grad school. I was just using it for my own data, which was like mouse behavioral data, and I was definitely not able to find good resources on that publicly. But yeah, thanks, John, for sharing that. Learning Statistics with R by Daniel Navarro is a fantastic book for kind of learning the why and how of traditional statistics.
Cool. Thanks, Luca. I had a question for you. I had never seen that book down site, so that's great because now I have like a million things now in addition to read. So maybe I hate it. I don't really know. So what's your view of R Markdown? I mean, my experience with the R community is I'm not sure it's a split necessarily, but I definitely have people at my office who are like, you must use R Markdown every time you code, and other people are a little less militant about it. So just curious on your take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it really depends on what you're doing. R Markdown essentially gives you a lot for free out of the gate, which is you could write the exact same code in a .r file, just a traditional script, and in a .rmd, and you'll get the same output. RMDs give you the ability to use things like parameters, so parameterized reports, which would be like using the same code, changing one thing, and suddenly you have an entirely new report with new data. And that kind of leveling up is really powerful with why you actually want to use statistical programming or coding is this concept of automation or building on it without changing much. I still do almost all of my cleaning for Tidy Tuesday in .r files because I'm just kind of iterating quickly through it. And then I'm doing commenting. So if we were to share, like go into one of these examples, like the GDPR violations from last week, because I'm essentially already within a Markdown document, I'm not using another R Markdown document, I'm just using a flat R file. So you can see I've done comments here as opposed to doing R Markdown, which would actually have sections of plain text or formatted text, and then the code itself. I definitely think that R Markdown is arguably one of the most powerful things out there in terms of like, if you look at the different things you can turn it into, I think it's rmarkdown.org. Googling it. Nope, it is .com. So let's try that. So there's a free book out there, R Markdown, the book, and hopefully I got it right. Maybe we'll just try R Markdown and search for it instead. rmarkdown.studio.com. There you go. So this has like why you'd use it for interactive programming, but more importantly, like you can take an R Markdown document, turn it into a website. Like my blog is written in R Markdown. You can do interactive dashboards in R Markdown. You can write Word documents. You can write textbooks. You can create presentations in R Markdown. Really, it's just like a front end to some type of rich back end. So I think if you're trying to create like a data product, R Markdown is super important. If you're doing coding kind of ad hoc, I typically do that in a .r file. But if I am going to share that code with someone else, like as a report, I think it would be a good idea to do it in our R Markdown notebook.
Interesting. So, and again, I'm not a pro R coder. So, yeah. but I was using just R scripts. And then the person that I was learning R with was like, nope, it should always be an R project. And so now I've gotten in, I think I've gotten in a good habit of using R projects every time, but I haven't quite started using R Markdown for every project. Even for the quick stuff I'm working on, I'm trying to do an R project, trying to be, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
No,
love, right?
I feel you for sure. So I think the biggest thing there is the concept of an R project is now you're encapsulating your environment. So the hardest things in computer science is like naming things and pathing. It's like there's a joke. It's like you list two things, and that's the most difficult things in programming. But pathing is a non-trivial problem if you're sharing between environments. So what an R project does is it now puts the parent directory at that R project. So and I might actually share, we'll do actually share my desktop. Let's see.
Here we go.
I'm working on a Tidy Tuesday one, so we'll
could be some live coding, everybody.
Yeah,
this is where it all falls apart right here.
Exactly, truly. This is as you can see, like I've got like 30 different data frames I'm working on here for this Animal Crossings data set that I've been playing around with. But the idea is that I'm inside my Tidy Tuesday project. So this is probably really small, so let me zoom in a bit. But importantly, if I were to get like my working directory, I'm already within Tidy Tuesday. So now if I want to read in a data set, I know I'm at this level. I'm inside my Tidy Tuesday R project, so I know that everything's relative to that. And if I share it with somebody, this entire project on like GitHub or something else, they can use the same code that I would to get to the same data set or to write out the same files. If I were to back out of this R project, suddenly I'm having to read things like from my documents or my desktop, which can get you all sorts of funky things like, users Thomas Mock. No one else has users Thomas Mock on their desktop, hopefully. So that is not ideal. The other part about our Markdown is like, if I'm writing in here, I can load a library and write some code, do whatever. If I use our Markdown, on the other hand, like it prompts me to, what am I trying to create? Presentation or a Shiny document or a template. We'll just say a plain document. Now I have the ability to write actual text that can be formatted, or URLs, or all sorts of other formatting text. So yes, I do think that our Markdown is super important. I just almost exclusively for like my data cleaning stuff will use like Markdown documents or .r files for these. So like hotels.r, going through and just writing comments as opposed to doing a whole R Markdown doc. I kind of rambled on there, so I'll stop and just kind of, yeah.
I think, for me personally, I don't know how others feel or if others use Markdown. For me, as a sort of novice R user, I felt like using R Markdown was like yet another language to learn. It's like a wrap around it. It doesn't seem to be it's for what I've seen and what I've done, doesn't seem to, super complicated, but it does seem to be like another piece that you have to learn, another syntax. So I think for me, I don't know about other people, but that's for me why I think I haven't really used it, although I certainly see the value of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the part that's attractive for me and is if you think about like you're creating a project or you're trying to create some type of thing to share with somebody. Like this blog, like my personal blog, is written in pure R Markdown. Like I don't have to know anything about HTML. I don't have to know anything about creating a website. I literally just write pure R Markdown docs, and I have a formatted website with all sorts of code listed in there, and this whole thing is reproducible because like I literally clicked like knit for the R Markdown, and it created this website for me. So that's really why like I love R Markdown, is the idea of creating something downstream. I think make whatever decision you want if you're just doing it for yourself, like internally for a one-off project. But the second you're thinking about creating a data product, whether that's sharing with a colleague or sharing externally, that's where our Markdown is like worth its weight 10 times over. Yes, you'll learn a little bit about Markdown, but like this whole website, if I actually go to, let's do a new one. If I go to like that actual code for it, opening a new, we're really going deep on the live coding randomness here. So we'll go into my personal blog for a second. Let's see.
Right.
So Thomas Mock. So we'll get into the personal blog. Hopefully this is clean. We'll see how it goes. So posts. So that one we were looking at was 10,000 dice rolls.
Right.
So if we go all the way up to the top, like, you know, there are 0 lines of HTML, CSS, or anything else in here. This is pure plain text and pure R code. So everything created in here was created in R and is now being as a front end to creating some type of nice output at the back end. So I can do exactly what I would do anyway, which is just write code, do things, take notes about what I'm doing. But now, just because I have something up here that says output, you know, radix article instead of output HTML document, it creates a website for me as opposed to just doing like a basic output. So like literally this is the code to create that entire web page. It's like 300 lines of code, but almost all of that is normal R code and just plain text.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I'm not saying I needed to be sold on it. I mean,
I'm very passionate about R Markdown. Yeah. It's just, it's amazing. It's like, you get all that for free. I mean, like R Markdown is an open source project.
Right.
R is an open source project. Like literally the amount of, and I'm going back to like my day job here for a second, but the amount of business value, whether it's for like a nonprofit or an education group or like an actual company, like all these different spectrums, the amount of, you know, value you get for a free product to creating some data product is huge there.
Yeah. We've got about 5 minutes left. I have one more question in my head, but I'll just see if anyone else has any questions because I'm just like a moderator. But does anyone, if you have a question, just feel free to unmute yourselves. So, okay, I gave it a nice long pause there. So a couple of people just looked up at their monitors to figure out what's wrong. So I think, I guess this may be the last question for today, but, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but maybe not. Are you, because I asked Mike Bostock this question last week. I'm curious, do you believe that everybody should be able to code?
Interesting. I think that, I don't think anyone has to do anything, but I do think that some type of programming has opened an enormous amount of doors for me. And whether it was personal success or ability to have resiliency in kind of uncertain job prospects or kind of get out of a situation, like I wanted to get out of grad school and do something else. If I didn't know how to code in R, that never would have happened. I would have done something completely different than what I did today. The other part is I do think that knowing a little bit of programming to solve daily problems is super helpful. So that automation piece, like, do I really want to write 100 reports when I can write one report and change 100 parameters that does it for me?
Yeah.
That has just like completely changed how I work and the amount of like output I can do. And again, open doors. So yes, I think if you're open to it, try it out. There's a lot of people out there that want to help you succeed, and there's a huge community that wants to help you. The R community is amazing. Like they've been extremely giving to me. My attempt to give back is through Tidy Tuesday, but other people give back by like literally just giving away some of their time to help you learn. So yeah, I think that it's a valuable skill for anyone regardless, especially in the realm of like data viz. If you think of like Nadia, remember when she was on a couple weeks ago, you know, she's doing this amazing work in JavaScript, and then she kind of goes back quickly to R to do some of the data cleaning. And so I think that even if you use some other tools in kind of that workflow, having the ability to use like, you know, learning a new skill set is useful regardless.
Yeah. I think that's a great positive note to end on. That's like, everybody's here to help everybody. I think it's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time.
I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for tuning on. Just a note that we'll be off from these discussions next week, but back the week after, assuming we're all home, which we will be. So thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Be healthy. Social distance. Wear masks. Drink bourbon in the evening time only after work is done. Tom, thanks again. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.